Okay, joining us is Dr. Will Horton. He is a licensed clinical psychologist, author, addictions counselor, and is considered the expert in mind control. Now, he's one of the only non-police professionals to ever attend the FBI hostage negotiation course, and his book, Mind Control: How to Get Others to Do What You Want, is now out. Dr. Will Horton, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
How did you get into this mind control and psychology business?
Well, I got into it a little different than most people. It wasn't like a career path from high school. What happened was at the age of 24, I'd already drank away a career and was suffering from an alcohol addiction that I was in traditional treatment and it wasn't quite working. And then I got exposed to these techniques that I learned in the mind control and the hypnosis and some of the other things that not only saved my life, it gave me a life worth living, and then allowed me to go back to school and get my doctorate and do some other things. So it started me on a passion that I share to this day of helping other people learn how their minds work. And it has led me to, as you just said, to go to the FBI and take their hostage negotiation course and study a little bit of profiling and forensics. And so it's been a fascinating journey.
Well, profiling, there's lots of TV shows on there. What does a psychologist bring to that process?
Well, really what happened was it was in the 70s that the behavioral science unit at the FBI started to use some of the sound psychological principles that you find in psychology and apply it to the criminal process, whether it's investigative, like what you said a profiler would do, or even something like what they call victimology. And when someone hears that, they get a little bit nervous, like, oh, you're blaming the victim. And really what it is you look at the victim's life and see where did it interchange with or interact with the perpetrator or wherever the crime happens to be, and then it can give you a lot of information. And it also can help you solve crimes, obviously, as you see in some of the television shows, but also break it down and maybe even begin to prevent crime, which is what they're doing now.
Now, are these television shows, is it really like that? It always seems like they get the answers way too soon.
Well, any of the forensic things, they have the DNA tests in 20 minutes, when in reality it takes several weeks. But it's a lot more complicated than it looks, but it's brought a whole new ball game to the table, so to speak, and it's changing the whole world of investigations and how they interact with other people. And that's what the whole hostage crisis negotiation thing is, and the whole forensic study, and even bringing that into other types of crime.
We talk a lot in the media about psychopaths, and many of them are serial killers. We're kind of fascinated by this. Are all psychopaths killers?
Well, no, and what's interesting about that, when you look at something like psychopaths or sociopaths, the terms are kind of interchangeable. One of the things to remember is a true sociopath or psychopath, one of the most telling features, and it's one of the things a psychologist would look for, is the absolute lack of remorse or guilt. They commit a crime and they have no guilt, no remorse, which is opposed to most people. They may commit a crime like they call it a crime of passion or a crime of opportunity, or even maybe under the influence of drugs or alcohol, which is horrible, but then they feel guilt and remorse, whereas a sociopath, they have no guilt. And what's also interesting is one of the scary things about it is we like to think that, we could tell what a sociopath looks like, like a Charles Manson or something like that, when in reality some of them are very charming. like Ted Bundy was one of the most charming people you could meet. In fact, at his trial, after he got convicted of all those horrible murders, one of the judges actually looked at him and said, you're a very charming individual. And so they're very charming. That's what's scary. And how many times, as a reporter, have you been on a scene and you're interviewing somebody about something bad like that, and they go, but he seemed like a normal guy, or he was a very nice guy. And so that's one of the scary things about sociopaths, and one of the things they're really studying.
Now, you've written a book on mind control. What exactly is mind control?
Well, mind control, it's one of those scary terms, or nebulous, and people are afraid of it and things like that. In reality, it's very simple. It's how people think and how you can use that information. And one of the biggest things people forget about mind control is teaching yourself how to control your own mind. It's kind of, if you learn the techniques that I teach at the seminars I do or in the books and things like that, is it inoculates you from other people influencing you in ways you don't want. Because really, this kind of stuff is happening all the time. That's what advertising is based on and things like that. So I teach you first how to control your own mind, and then we try to teach you how to maybe influence other people. And that's what, parents, teachers, police officers, salesmen, this is the type of information they could use in an awful lot of ways.
Britney Spears seems to be having a meltdown right in front of everyone's eyes. Can you tell us, let's look at it, a little gossip here. What can you tell us about what's happening to this poor girl?
Well, one of the things you have to look at when you like, if you want to call it profiling or look at someone that's going through one of those situations, whether it's Britney Spears or the horrible thing that happened a few months ago with Heath Ledger, is you have to step out of your realm of existence. I mean, it's easy to look at one of these people and go, well, I'd never do that. Well, you have to remember they come from a whole different circumstance and a whole different mindset. And someone like Britney Spears, we must remember, she got fame very young, and when most of us were going through high school, that's where we really learn our socialization skills. And even some of the bad things about high school, the cliques and the bullying and the things like that, these people were never exposed to. They were, spoon-fed glory and fame from a young child. And then now as young adults, they have all this fame and power, which comes with the money, and all these other people that surround them. So it kind of inoculates them from some of the, repercussions of their behavior. And that's why they keep doing it. And so, when you really look at it from that standpoint, you begin to, maybe not, I'm not saying forgive it, but if you look at it, it's a little bit more understandable. And also, we got to remember in our culture, as bad as it is to say, is that we worship fame. I mean, that's what a lot of the reality TV shows are all about. So even some of the negative publicity is still publicity. So that could be one of the reasons they do it. And then the last thing I always say when we look at that is they go, oh, it wasn't like that in the old days. We must remember that in the old days of like Hollywood and the media and things like that, people were a little bit more controlled because of like the studio system in Hollywood or the music system. I mean, you didn't get fame that young. You had to earn it. And you also had the fear that they would take it away from you. And so it's been in the last few years that this has happened. And the other thing is with the advent of the newer drugs, when you combine that with the alcohol, it can speed up the whole addiction process.
Okay, fascinating. Thanks so much for joining me.
And thank you for having me.